Hi, friends. Did you know that our state parks are suffering from a multi-million-dollar budget shortfall due to decades of underfunding? Our legislators need to hear from park visitors and champions like you who care about the future of our parks. Join me on Wednesday, January 22nd in Richmond for Parks Advocacy Day, hosted by the Virginia Association for Parks. As a proud member of VAFP, I will be leading a group of park champions and speaking with legislators about support for our state parks. Experience is not required. If you are new to advocacy, rest assured we will prepare you in advance and pair you with an experienced advocate. Learn more about Parks Advocacy Day and last week's special edition episode. Then register by clicking on Parks Advocacy Day in the show notes of your listening app. I look forward to seeing you in Richmond. From the Blue Ridge Mountains to the Chesapeake Bay, Virginia is a mecca for outdoor travel and adventure. Virginia Outdoor Adventures podcast is your local guide for hiking, camping, kayaking, travel, and so much more. Get the information and the inspiration to plan your own adventure right here in Virginia. I'm your host, Jessica Bowser. It's that time of year when we set intentions for the future. Will your resolutions be outdoorsy? Alejandra Villanueva of the hiking community Girls Who Hike Virginia shares the story of her ambitious pursuit to hike Old Rag Mountain 36 times before the end of 2024. Her remarkable journey beautifully intertwined her love of hiking with the transformative power of nature. Alejandra's adventures on Old Rag are a testament of resilience and profound self-discovery. She offers insights into staying motivated amid unexpected challenges and harnessing the power of a hiking community in keeping her accountable. As we look ahead to the new year, we discuss how to set meaningful outdoor goals for a year of adventure. Let's go. Virginia Outdoor Adventures is sponsored by Virginia State Parks. Whether you're after a relaxing picnic or a 2-week vacation, leave life's daily pressures behind and reconnect with nature and family at a nearby state park. You'll find plenty of programs, events, and activities among 43 parks, plus thousands of campsites, hundreds of cabins, more than 500 miles of trails, and convenient access to Virginia's major waterways. From Cumberland Gap to the Atlantic Ocean, there's something for everyone at Virginia State Parks. Discover your next state park adventure by clicking on Virginia State Parks in the show notes of your listening app. Alejandra, welcome to Virginia Outdoor Adventures.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, Jessica.
What do you love about Virginia's outdoors?
So as a new hiker, one of the things I love the most is how much there is to hike. Every single hike I go on, we talk about like our favorite hikes and trails, and I always leave with like a notepad on my phone full of new hikes that I've never heard of that someone highly recommends. And it seems like the list just never ends. So that's probably my favorite thing.
That's true. The list really doesn't ever end. I had a friend once tell me that she did all the hikes in Virginia and there was nothing left to do and she was bored. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Because there's so many places to hike. I don't know how you could possibly run out.
Yeah, I don't. Especially there's a little of everything. You have to be willing to travel to. Like I've lived in Virginia for 25 years now. I didn't understand that I could go 7 hours and still be in Virginia. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's right. Especially from Northern Virginia. Like some parts of the state are a far drive, but it just means that there's always something to explore.
Yes.
What inspired you to begin hiking since you're a newbie?
So this was at the end of, I think it was 2022. I had spent the entire year trying to hike Old Rag because I had hiked it before in my early 20s. And I remember just loving how it felt. You know, coming out of the pandemic, I did not want to go back to the gym, but I wanted movement in my life. I was trying to get back into like a healthy groove. I just remember like hiking felt really good. And I had spent all year trying to hike and just throughout my friend groups was not able to accomplish it because they wanted to hike during like the perfect weather and things like that. And I think all I wanted to do that year was just hike it once. But the fact that I wasn't able to somehow became like this goal of like, I want to hike more. So I remember I'm big into New Year's and I just wrote down in my New Year goal that I was making, hike more. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. I had no clue that I would become an actual like avid hiker. I just knew that I wanted to hike more and I just wanted to move and be happy doing movement. And that's what got me started into it.
So you just mentioned the first time that you hiked Old Rag was long before you set this goal for yourself. Do you remember what that experience was like? I mean, it must have had an impact on you if you decided you wanted to set this big goal for yourself.
So I first hiked it October of 2013. That was my first time hiking it. I don't remember all of it, but I remember a few parts. The most impactful one was, I think this is probably the moment I fell in love with hiking. I just didn't know it. We were going up the first 2.5 miles, which is just like the steep incline. And I was going on this hike with a friend. It was her birthday, which I did not know this until I looked it up that we went for her birthday. It was right after my first big heartbreak. So I was like, in that grieving state. And it was my first time hiking anything that challenging as we were going up and my legs were on fire, my calves were hurting. Like I remember looking at her and being like, "Oh my God, this is so painful. I love it." And I told her that for the first time, my body was matching the way I felt on the inside because I was grieving. And something about that, I'm not a sports person. I've never played sports. I've never been athletic. So I had never experienced that before. It was my first time and I really enjoyed it. It was very like cathartic for me. So I remember that. I also remember we made protein pancakes and that's what we had for food. I also remember now looking back on it that I was not prepared at all for the hike that I did. I wore sneakers. I barely had like one little water bottle with me. Like now I look back on it, I'm like, oh, that's cute. I would never hike it like that again. But that was the first time. And I only hiked it. I actually looked through my Instagram and I only hiked it 3 or 4 more times in the following 2 or 3 years, and then never hiked it again until 2, 3 years ago.
I can believe that because I think I first hiked Old Rag, I don't know, more than a decade ago at least. And I was with a group of guy friends. And my recollection was that it took all of them to pull me and lift me up through the rock scramble because I'm pretty short. Like I've got short arms and legs. And as you know, there's some challenging parts in that rock scramble. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I would have made it through without these guys there helping me. After that, I kind of had it in my head that I couldn't hike it by myself and that I had to have people with me who were going to help me through. Now, I know now that that's not necessarily true. You know, you do it and you have a certain recollection of it. And then it's not until you start to push yourself on your own that you realize you can do it on your own.
Yes, and I think my memory blocked the scramble out because I have no memory of the scramble that first time. It was probably very hard. The gap that you do it towards the end of the scramble, when I went back a few years ago, I remember the first time that I recall doing it, it was a huge struggle for me. So I'm like, how did I do it in my 20s? Like, I have no clue how I did it in my early 20s. So I think I just blocked it out, and it probably required a lot of help too, because looking back through the pictures, there was a group of us and we did have like several guys with us. So like I'm sure they helped us through it because I don't remember.
I believe it. And so, what was the impetus for setting a goal to hike Old Rag 36 times? That's a big number for 1 year.
Yes. All right. So there was two parts. The decision came in two parts. The first one was, and I actually looked it up, it was May of 2023. I was hiking Old Rag with a group. As we were hiking it, we started talking about another fellow hiker who has hiked it over 300 times. Now, she at the time lived near it. I had hiked it over 300 times over 10 years. So as we were walking and talking about this, I'm a numbers person. So in my head, I was like, oh, like if she hikes it like 3 times a month. That's like 36 a year. That's like 360 in 10 years. I can see how that's doable. Right away, I was like, oh my God, 36 in a year. I'm turning 36 in 2024. And as I'm like hiking and I think of this, I'm like, oh, I have to do it. I have to. Like the numbers align perfectly. And this was in May. So in that moment, I was like, I can figure out how to do it by next year, right? Like how to challenge myself to do it. So that was the moment where I was like, came up with the idea. And then we did the hike and everything. And then I got home and I went to the shower. And when I was in the shower, I was like, just brainstorming, like the logistics of this. Like, can I realistically do this? And I was already at that point hiking 3 times a month. So I was like, okay, now I'm just hiking the same mountain 3 times a month, like no big deal. And I remember the question that came up for me was, so old rag, especially now in my late 30s, every time I've hiked it, afterwards, I ride this high of feeling like an absolute badass. It's very empowering for me. It challenges me, not just physically, but also mentally, even emotionally at times. And afterwards, when I go back to work on Monday, I can deal with the world in such a different way now. Like nothing feels as hard as it did on Friday, right? I was sitting in the shower, I was like, what if? What if I could feel that high for a whole year? What would that do for me? What would that do for my mental health, for my healing, for just my development? And the moment that question came up, I was like, oh, well, now I have to do it. I have to answer that question. What would this challenge do for me? And I remember as I'm in the shower, I shout out to my fiance, Aaron. I was like, Aaron, and he had to come. And I was like, I'm going to hike Gold Rag next year, I think 36 times. So I'm going to need you to support me through this, okay? Because it's going to require a lot.
And you said this to him from the shower.
From the shower. I just knew that I had to like get the ball rolling right away. And I knew the first thing I needed to do was let him know because this was going to require a lot of time and commitment. And he knows me. He knows I'm crazy like that. I'll just do things randomly. And he was like, okay. He just walked away. And that's how it started.
That's so funny. You can even wait till you got out of the shower to tell him your plans.
I couldn't. I was very excited.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting what motivated you or what convinced you that this was a great idea. Because I think for some folks, and I think this would be true for me, I'd be wondering, what else am I missing out on if I'm only hiking the same trail over and over again for the entire year? Like, what about all those other trails that I wanted to try? Or what about new parks or new wildlife management areas or, new natural area preserves? Like, I would be thinking, okay, now I'm committed to this one thing for a full year and I won't get to do any of those other things. Did that thought go through your head at all?
Yes and no. Like as you're saying it right now, I'm like, I don't think I actually like sat down and thought about it. But as you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. But I don't feel that way. So one of the reasons why I love Old Rag, like I think at this point I have a relationship with this mountain. I love it because as you drive up to it, you can clearly see it. Like you're pulling up, you're like 5 minutes away from it and you see it and it's massive and you can see the boulders and it's just magnificent there. And then you drive up to it and now you can't see it anymore and you just go into this trail. And as you start hiking it, if you do this in the winter, you can actually start to see the summit as you're climbing up. But during those first 2 to 3 miles, you can't really see what you're going to enjoy at some point. You just have to trust and keep going. And then you start to see the fall summit. And the fall summit is just beautiful, gorgeous. And you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. And a lot of people, when they get to the fall summit, they think that's it. And they're like, that's it, we made it. And it's like, no, now you're actually about to go into a 1 mile scramble. And it's really hard.
Yeah, there's a lot more left after that.
There's a lot more. You're really about to get started. And to me, there's something about that that just kind of matches what life is like, right? It's like we put in all this work for things and we tend to think like, okay, cool, I did all the work. I got here. We're solid now. It's like, no, actually, a lot of times in life, that's when the fun really begins and also when the work really begins. And then you do all the scramble and it requires for you to do things with your body that you probably don't do in other hikes and for you to face your fears and work with others and all these elements that again life also requires. And then when you get to the summit, it is just stunning, but you do have to climb those boulders in order to be able to get the full 360-degree view, which not everybody does when they're at the summit, and that's also kind of matching to life. And we all make it, but we all decide what we do with it. And then the way down is longer than the way up. And that also, I feel like it matches with life a lot too. This whole journey of Old Rag has been very healing for me. And I've had a lot of epiphanies. I've had a lot of moments where I've been maybe struggling with something in life and I choose to go to Old Rag to work through it as I hike through it. I just knew that if I spent the whole year on that specific mountain, that I would not regret it. There's other wonderful hikes I've done. McAfee Knob is one of my favorite ones, but none of the other hikes that I've done so far do for me and my soul what Old Rag does. So yeah, that's why Old Rag had to be the one.
That makes perfect sense to me, especially as somebody who has hiked Old Rag. Anybody who's been through the rock scramble and to the false summit and then beyond the false summit to the actual summit and down the fire road probably is nodding their head right now going, yeah, I could see that. And when you and I hiked it together a few weeks ago, you were describing to me all the different ways in which you have hiked Old Rag. And I thought that was so smart because you're not doing exactly the same thing every time. Sometimes you have different people with you. Sometimes you're completely by yourself. Sometimes you were doing sunrise or sunset, and you had ways of mixing it up so that it wasn't the same repetitive thing every single time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So again, I had a lot of time to plan this, which was good. When I started thinking about it, I was like, all right, how do I spice this up? Because I did hear that both in my head and externally from other people, like, are you gonna get bored of Old Drag? And I was like, I don't think so, but let's plan for it just in case. So I knew that I wanted to do sunrise. I knew that I wanted to do sunset, which at the time felt scary because being in the woods in the dark wasn't something I was comfortable with back then. Now I'm very comfortable, but back then I wasn't. So I knew that. I knew that. So I'm part of an organization, Girls Who Hike Virginia. So I knew that I wanted to facilitate hikes for women who had never hiked it before. That particular part of the goal came out of a friendship that I have with a family friend who's in her 60s. And during 2023, she asked me to help her hike Old Rag, and I did. So when I had that experience with her in 2023 and I was planning my 2024 challenge, I knew that I wanted to have that feeling again of helping someone else conquer that mountain. Because for some people, like my fiance who grew up in Vermont, Old Rag is not a big deal. They just go do it in their sneakers, shorts, and like they're good to go. For other people like me, it is a big deal. It's like this big monumental thing that you are not even sure if you can do. And so I wanted to reach out to those women in the Girls Hike Virginia community and tell them like, hey, if this is your goal, I want to do it with you. So I knew that I was going to do several hikes with them. I also knew that Old Rag could be done in different ways. So I learned to do it from the back way. I also gave myself permission to treat the fall summit as a summit because it is. It's still a very, challenging hike just to get to the fall summit. So I allowed myself to have that experience count. And then doing it through the back way is probably one of my favorite ways of hiking it now. And I didn't even discover it until halfway through the year that I could do it that way. You can actually hike it and completely avoid the scramble, which I thought was really cool too, because for some people, that may be the limiting factor, like the scramble section. And it's like, oh, well, you can actually make it all the way to the summit without even touching the scramble. You're going to deal with different challenges, but you can get there. So, yeah, a lot of that. I also knew that I wanted to hike it in different formats, like also just to have fun. I did one for Halloween. I love Halloween. And I had seen at the time somewhere on like Instagram, the sheet ghost where you like put on a sheet and put on your sunglasses. So I had this idea that for Halloween I would want to do a hike with my friends and we would all carry up our sheets and sunglasses so that we could do like a photo shoot at the top, and we did. So just a few different ways of like spicing it up and making it more exciting than just hiking Old Rag every time.
Adventure seekers will find endless opportunities in Grayson County, where many of Virginia's iconic trails and landmarks excite hikers, cyclists, paddlers, and happy campers alike. Imagine this, you're hiking on one of the most scenic sections of the entire Appalachian Trail through the George Washington and Jefferson National Forests. Summiting Mount Rogers or White Top Mountain, the two highest peaks in Virginia, or strolling through the valley of Elk Garden, where the now extinct eastern elk once roamed. Or maybe your perfect day is on the water. Grayson County is home to the New River, one of the oldest and most scenic rivers in the world. Enjoy a leisurely Class 1 float with the family or adrenaline-packed Class 3 rapids. Navigate the waters using the New River Float Calculator to plan your trip. The app factors flow rate, water levels, weather conditions, vessel type, and more to calculate flow times from point A to point B. Prefer two wheels? You won't want to miss the Grayson Gravel Traverse, a 72-mile mixed-surface gravel bike route that connects the Virginia Creeper Trail and New River Trail over well-maintained and remote roads, featuring a variety of challenging climbs in the foothills of Virginia's highest peaks. This overlooked gem of Virginia presents some of the best gravel cycling in the state, mostly unridden and undiscovered. After a day of adventure, there's nothing like gathering round a campfire under a sky filled with stars. Grayson County offers plenty of spots to pitch a tent, like the New River Campground, or cozy up in a rustic cabin at the Buck Wild Reserve. Discover why Virginia is for outdoor lovers. Start your Grayson County adventure at the historic 1908 Courthouse and Visitor Center, or access the Visitor's Guide online by clicking on Visit Grayson County in the show notes of your podcast listening app. That is super fun. And also, when you and I were at the summit together, you busted out this hula hoop. I was like, yes. What are you doing? But by the end, I was absolutely sold on it. Can you talk about what the hula hoop is all about?
So the hula hoop, I've always loved hula hooping. It's one of those things. So I immigrated here from Peru. And it's one of those things that's just been with me my whole life. I've always been naturally good at it. I've always kept it with me. Like I've always owned a hula hoop. Now it's like a workout hula hoop that's weighted. So not like the traditional ones, but I've always had it. I've always loved it. And I've gone through my seasons of like years of not touching it. And then I do, right? It all depends on like where I am in life. And a few years ago, I did these group coaching sessions where the girl who leads it teaches about pleasure stacking. And she talks about like when you find something that you enjoy doing, for example, walking. If you love walking, how can you pleasure stack on top of that? Perhaps you also love learning, so you can make sure you set up like your favorite podcast the night before so you can listen to it. Perhaps you love photography. So as you're going on your walk, you bring your camera and you search for cool pictures to take. So I took that, and for me, it's more value stacking than pleasure stacking. That just feels better for me. And I took that, and I've been working on that for years. So when I started hiking and loving hiking, I started applying that mindset to it. And I was like, all right, so if I'm gonna eat on my hike, I'm gonna eat something that I love eating, right? If I'm gonna have sugar on my hikes because it helps with my energy, I'm gonna have like my favorite chocolate. I'm gonna make myself chocolate covered strawberries and like really elevate the experience. And then came the idea of like hula hooping. I was like, well, I love hula hooping and I love hiking. How cool would it be to hula hoop on summits of mountains? Why not? And why not do it while the sun is rising or setting, and do it with your best friends and doing it listening to your favorite song? And it's this mindset that just allows you to continue just building and building the happiness pretty much. So that's where that came from. The first time I did it, I was nervous because I was like, people are gonna think I'm crazy. But then I think the first time I did it, I was doing it and someone came out of like, it was at the summit of Old Drag, and someone came out and they were like, oh my God, I love hula hooping. Can I borrow it? And I was like, yes. And so they borrowed it. And then some of the girls that I was with, they also started doing it. And I was like, oh, I'm sharing the happiness that this brings to me with other people. So now I don't always bring it, but when I do bring it, I take it out. People end up enjoying doing it, and it just spreads the happiness. So that's where the hula hoop comes from.
Yeah, that day that you and I were up there, so it was a holiday weekend and it was a fee-free day in the park, so we knew there was going to be a lot of people. And there were a lot of people at the summit, and when you pulled it out, I was really interested in seeing what the reactions were going to be. And the majority of the people are so busy, having their own moments that they're not paying attention to what you or anybody else is doing, right? But there were people who came up and were like, can I try that? Or one woman said to you, like, she hadn't done it in years and years and just wanted to like try it again. And she was so happy when you gave her that hula hoop, and whoever was with her, I don't know if they were family or friends, but they're taking pictures and they're loving it too. And everybody was so into it. And you're right, it was just like spreading the happiness.
Yeah, because I mean, you're going to be at the summit. Typically, you're going to hang out there. You're going to be eating. You're going to be taking pictures. So it's like, why not bring it? I currently live in a space where like I don't have a lot of space in my house to be hula hooping. So I have to take it outside in order to use it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then, of course, I got to try it. I don't think I've hula hooped since like elementary school gym class. I can't remember another time that I've done it. And I didn't think I would be able to, but I picked it up and it worked. I was like, holy crap, I'm doing this.
You are. It feels fun. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all the whole idea is like movement, it's whatever feels good to you. Cause I've learned for myself, like, I can't do the gym. Maybe one day the gym will be fun for me, but it's not today. So that's why hiking, hula hooping. I recently got myself a little trampoline. So I'm like, even in order to move, because I know that I want to move and it's good for me, it needs to be thoroughly enjoyable. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
No, I totally hear you on that. I feel the same way about the gym. I mean, I go to the gym, but I'm not happy to be there. It's more like something that I'm powering through to get it over with because I know that it's good for me and maybe there's not another option for me that day. But anything that I can do outside completely changes the experience. Like now I even do my yoga outside and, in the mornings. And that is totally different than doing it in my living room. So yeah, it's like it changes everything. And if it gets you excited to do it, then the motivation will stick too.
Yeah.
And another thing you did while we were there that I really loved is you talked about taking off your shoes so that you could actually like feel the earth under your feet and connecting in that moment. And I never thought to do that. Of all the years that I've been hiking and spending time outside, like sure, I'll take my shoes off if I'm at the beach or, some other special place, but at a summit, like it never occurred to me to do that. What made you think to do something like that?
I went on a hike with a fellow ambassador for Girls Hike Virginia, and she actually hosts one of my favorite hikes. Her boyfriend is a geologist. So they host geology hikes around, across Virginia. And I went on their old rag geology hike, which was amazing. But when we were at the summit, I had already, for some reason, I've been into grounding, which is, the practice of having your feet touch the bare earth for a while. And I asked her when we were at the summit, I was like, hey, all this like scrambling that we just did with our bare hands, does that also do the same thing as grounding? And she said, no, it doesn't because it has to be through your feet. And I was like, oh, okay. And she goes, but you can take off your shoes right now. And I was like, I can't? I was like, oh, yeah, I can. We're going to hang out at the summit anyway. She explained to me how, like, even though you are at the top of the mountain, you're still grounding because it's directly connected to the earth. So I did it for the first time. And I actually ended up climbing boulders barefoot, which was, again, as I'm doing it, I'm like, what am I doing? This is crazy. But it actually became really, really fun. Again, it elevated the experience. And now I do it pretty much every time. I haven't done it the last few times because we're in the middle of winter and it's really cold. But if the temperature is decent, I'm taking off my shoes. And then I spent like, 15, 20 minutes up there, sometimes hula hooping while barefoot. I've gotten some of my friends to start doing it too. And what ends up happening is one, you're grounding, and people can look up all the benefits for that. But when you put back your shoes, it almost feels like your feet got like a massage or something. And they're not as tired as they were before. And like, now you're ready to go on the way down. And I've actually also done it on the way down at Old Rag. Towards the end, you pass a few little creeks. And we've done that before in the summer where we take off our shoes and go into the creek. That also feels fantastic because you're right before the car. So again, your feet, if you the water there is always gonna be cold. So it's just like fantastic. It feels phenomenal. And then you just walk to your car and your feet just feel really good.
Oh, yeah. So you're having a spa experience too before you get in your car to go home.
Yes.
So, what challenges have you faced in reaching your goal? I'm sure there has to be several.
The first one that comes to mind is the summer. The summer kicked my butt. So I've learned, again, I've only been avidly hiking for the last 2 years now. I've learned that I do not like hiking in the summer. Mosquitoes love me and the ticks and all the bugs, and it's uncomfortable, and there's only so much you can do. Your water doesn't stay as cold as you want it to be. I need my water to be ice cold all the time. So I hate it. And I did know that ahead of time. I knew that summer was going to be rough. So I planned for it, and I planned on doing a lot of sunrise hikes for summer. But what I didn't understand was that I didn't currently have a good process for sleeping the night before a sunrise. And I actually still don't have a good process because I did this yesterday and only slept 2.5 hours. As I started going into summer and planning all these sunrise hikes, I was doing them. And within like a few weeks, I burnt myself out. I was exhausted. I had some great pictures, but like I just couldn't do it. So then I got overwhelmed with work, just a bunch of different things happened, and I stopped hiking for like 2 months. So then I was already a little bit behind. Like the goal of hiking 3 times a month, I think I only did that for the first 2 months 2, 3 months of the year. And then boom, I fell behind. There were fires that happened in Shenandoah in March. So those affected my hiking. Then the summer came and affected my hiking. Honestly, just dealing with the stressors of life. I realized that when life gets stressed, when gets stressed, all that stuff happens, hiking tends to be one of the first things that I put on the back shelf. When you're having a hiking challenge, it's like really hard because it's like, oh, wait, no. But it was good, actually. The hiking challenge made me be more aware of the fact that I was putting hiking in the back shelf and pushed me to take it out. But yeah, so managing my scheduled hikes and having to restructure it whenever life would happen and continuing trying to reach the 36. That was the challenging part was just not being able to hike for certain periods of time and then realizing how behind I was and then working on catching up.
I'm sure, especially, okay, so you live in Northern Virginia. And so how long is the drive for you to get to Old Rags? Like an hour and a half?
Yeah, it's an hour and 20 minutes, but I always want to stop and get gas and do all that stuff. So yeah, hour and a half.
Yeah, so I'm sure that just that alone would be for a lot of people enough to make them think, I'm not going to bother because I'm going to spend 3 hours in the car today just to do this hike. So I guess you must have to factor that in when you're deciding to do this. Are you willing to spend that time going back and forth as well?
Yes, the time also, and then the ticketing. So, Old Drag requires tickets, I believe it's from like March to November. That, when they first started with the ticketing process, I completely, and I still fully support it. But it became a struggle for me because what I realized was, let's say I had plans with friends on a Sunday, so I wasn't going to hike Old Drag that day. And then the plans fell through on that Friday. Well, guess what? The tickets are already sold out, so I can't go hike it. So that was another issue was there were days where I could have gone to hike it that I wasn't able to because I didn't have the tickets. So that became a thing. There were also times where like I would buy tickets and then not be able to hike it, but then I learned you can actually transfer your tickets to a different date. So that was good because I learned something about their system. Yeah, I did get a few tickets driving to Old Drag at the beginning of the year. And I also did have a minor bump in with a little deer that he did get up and walk away. But that happened like the tickets and the deer happened in the first month of hiking Old Drag this year. And I was like, oh my God, is this how it's going to go? But thankfully it didn't. That was all that I saw that was negative when I was driving there.
Well, luckily that wasn't enough to make you throw up your hands and say, forget it. I'm not doing
No, no.
this. I mean, at any point did you ever think you might not reach your goal?
No, because I know myself and I know that I'm pretty stubborn, and especially when it has to do with something where the world is aware. Like if I had done this challenge and no one had known that I was doing it, 100%, I would have thrown the towel probably 10 different times. But I knew that about myself. So when I was planning my challenge, I went ahead and I was like, all right, how am I going to create accountability for myself? And let's not pretend we're not who we are because we are. So I knew for myself that when it comes to accountability, I need somebody else to be aware of what's happening. So for me, I made sure like I was telling everybody in my life that I was doing that. Also through our group of Girls Like Virginia, we have a Facebook group, and I went ahead and I posted it there. When I went on my first hike of the year, which I did it on the first day of the year, I posted it and I was like, here's my first hike of the 36. And I like told our 30,000 members that I was doing this challenge. So that made it so that I had that peer pressure. And I knew that I was going to have to figure out how to do it. I think around September, I was really stressing because I was really behind on my hikes, but I knew that I had to do it. I went on a hike with a friend, a different hike, not Old Drag. And I remember her being like, oh, what number are you at? And I was like, oh, I'm really behind. I'm at this number. And she goes like, oh, but that's okay. If you don't meet it, it's still really cool that you've hiked it this many times. And I looked at her and I was like, no, like I have to do it. I have to do it. I will not, I could not live with myself. I've told the whole world I'm doing this, which to me, my whole world is that group that I have. I was like, I cannot live with that shame. It's just no. I couldn't. It got to the point where I was like, all right, how am I going to do this? I actually ended up hiking it one time twice because I needed to catch up.
That's so crazy. I still can't believe that you did it twice in one day.
It was not that bad. So as I started, At first, Old Drag used to be one of those hikes where I would do it and I was going to the couch the rest of the day. Like I was not moving and I was so sore for the next few days.
I think that's most people.
That was me at first. And then the hike's still challenging for me, but then I realized I was like, "Oh, I get home and I'm fine now. I'm not sore at all whatsoever." So then I was like, I think physically I'm able to do it. I didn't go into it blindly. I have hiked before. I think the most I've hiked is 18 miles. So I've done the mileage before. Now, that was just not, I didn't have a scramble or anything like that, but I knew that I could do the mileage. And then I found a friend who was crazy enough to attempt it with me. And then we went ahead and scheduled it out. And it was really cool. It was a really cool experience. It's really cool to be able to say that I did that. And actually, like I was sore the next day and the day after that, but it actually did not end up being that much harder than doing it. It was more mentally hard than anything else. Physically, I think I was fine. Mentally, I was questioning my life decisions the whole day.
Join us next week for part 2 of this episode when Alejandra concludes her remarkable journey and shares how to set meaningful outdoor goals for the year ahead. Virginia Outdoor Adventures is inspired by and supported by listeners like you, which is why your messages and feedback mean so much to me. You can text me directly by clicking on Send Me a Text Message in your show notes. I answer questions, respond to comments, and share your feedback on the show. Never miss an update. Get even more information and inspiration by signing up for my newsletter. Click on Newsletter Sign Up in your show notes or visit virginiaoutdooradventures.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adventure on.